Hi there, and thanks for watching this video. Today I have a project I'm really excited to be sharing with you, and that is this awesome outdoor fireplace that anyone with a welder can build. So follow along, enjoy the video, and thanks for watching. The materials you'll need for this project are 2 cans of high heat paint, 2 weld-on hinges, 1 large bolt, 8 feet of 1 inch by 1 inch by 1/8 of an inch angle iron, 3 8-foot long pieces of 1 inch by 1/8 of an inch flat bar, 5 feet by 2 feet of 1/2 inch expanded steel, and 4 feet by 4 feet of 16 gauge sheet metal. In terms of tools, I'm going to be doing all the welding with a Millermatic 140 MIG welder, and you'll also need to have a jigsaw and a grinder with a flap disc. Also, make sure you take all the necessary safety precautions for this build. The first step is to cut the sheet metal. Begin by cutting the 4 foot by 4 foot square into 2 lengths that are 10 inches tall and 2 that are 9 1/8 of an inch tall. Take one of the 10-inch lengths and cut out 2 trapezoids from it by measuring along the base and marking off 24 inches and 28 1/4 of an inch. Along the top, measure and mark off 9 7/8 of an inch, 14 1/8 of an inch, and 38 1/8 of an inch. Now use your straight edge to draw the following lines and then cut along these lines. Do this to the other 10-inch long length as well, and you're left with 4 identical trapezoids. Now take your 9 1/8 of an inch lengths and do the same thing, but this time along the base marking off 24 inches and 32 1/2 inches, and along the top marking off 7 3/4 of an inch, 16 1/4 of an inch, and 40 1/4 of an inch. Make your cuts along the diagonals and you'll have another set of 4 identical trapezoids. Out of the offcuts of the sheet metal, you'll need to make 4 more trapezoids according to this diagram here, and also 4 trapezoids that fit this diagram as well. Finally, cut out a square that is 4 1/4 of an inch by 4 1/4 of an inch, and another square that is 5 inches by 5 inches. Now you've cut everything you need to out of the sheet metal and you're ready to go on to the next step. Next, we're going to cut the expanded steel grating. Start off with the 2 foot by 5 foot piece and cut out 3 pieces that are 24 inches by 14 inches and 1 piece that is 20 inches by 13 inches. The easiest way I've found to cut through expanded steel is just using a jigsaw. First measure and find the point you need to cut at, and then cut at the same point on the grid all the way across. Also, make sure you clamp the expanded steel sheet down firmly when you attempt to cut and support the whole thing so it doesn't bend and break the blade on your jigsaw. Cut the angle iron into 4 2-foot long pieces. First measure and mark 2 feet, square the mark off on both sides, and then cut with a hacksaw. Similarly, cut the flat bar into 8 2-foot long sections, 2 20-inch sections, and 2 15-inch sections. You'll also need 2 3-inch long pieces of flat bar and 1 1.5-inch long tab. Weld 2 square frames out of the 2-foot long sections of flat bar. First tack all the pieces together at 90-degree angles, then weld them together from the inside. Set one of the frames aside for the next step. We're now going to make the base of the fireplace where the logs and ashes will sit. You'll need one of the square frames we made in the last step and the 10-inch tall trapezoids. Attach the trapezoids onto the frame like so, lightly tacking from the outside. Once all the trapezoids are tacked to the frame, bend them together and apply a few more tacks. Ensure there are no gaps and everything fits together flush, and if it doesn't, you may need to use a file to clean up some of the edges. Now weld along all the connections from the inside. Make sure you don't burn through the steel, which is easy to do on metal this thin, and also to prevent warpage, avoid prolonged welding in one area. Run a short bead on one side, then move over to the other side, giving the metal a chance to cool before you continue. This is vital as any warpage will cause a lot of problems when we put the fireplace together. When the welding is done, grind the outside smooth with your flap disc. Similar to how we made the base of the fireplace, now we're going to make the roof. Tack the other large trapezoids to the other square frame, then tack on the small trapezoids with the 8.5-inch base to the top of the roof in a similar manner. When you're welding up the roof, it is especially important not to burn through or warp the metal, as it'll be seen a lot more than the base. After you complete all the welds, grind the top flat as well, and make sure there are no sharp edges or points. Now we're going to make the chimney. You'll need the last set of trapezoids as well as the 4 1/4-inch square. Tack the tops of the trapezoids to the square and press them together, then weld from the inside. Now grind the outside smooth, making sure there are no sharp edges or corners. Tack the angle iron onto the outside of the roof of the fireplace. The top of the angle should come to about 1/4 of an inch below the top of the flat bar frame. Check to make sure the legs are square by ensuring the distances between them at the top and bottom are all the same. Weld the legs on from the inside and then along the top and the sides. Next, set the bottom of the fireplace in between the legs and measure a gap of 13 inches between the top and the bottom. Tack the bottom in place and make sure it is 13 inches on all sides all the way around, then weld it in place first from the inside, then along the outside of the legs. Next, you're going to need to fabricate the door of the fireplace. Weld the 15-inch sections of flat bar to the outside of the 20-inch sections to make a frame that looks like this. Grind the welds flat on both sides and also grind along the top to ensure there are no sharp corners or edges. Now take a piece of flat bar that is roughly 8 inches and bend the end of it over to form a handle. Weld the folded over piece down and grind it flat. Next, drill a hole big enough for your bolt to fit through near the top of the handle and also on the frame you just made at approximately 6 inches up from the bottom corner. You'll also need to drill out the 1.5 inch tab of flat iron. Now weld the expanded steel grate in place in the frame, and again make sure you don't overheat the metal and cause warpage. Weld the 3 pieces of grating into the fireplace like so. Next, install the door by first tacking the hinges to it, then tacking the hinges to the fireplace. Make sure the hinges are orientated in such a way that you can lift the door off to remove it. Once the hinges are firmly tacked and the door is square to the frame, remove the door and weld the hinges. Grind down these welds and also grind down the welds of the grating to the door. Now weld the handle and the tab in place so that when the handle is vertical, the tab is horizontal. Finally, weld on the chimney using the 2 3-inch long pieces of flat bar. Grind down any last rough edges on the outside of the fireplace and make sure it is clean. As an optional step, you might want to weld feet onto the legs of the fireplace, and you will also need to make a cover for the base of the fireplace using the 5-inch square. I simply welded some flat bar to it to form a handle. Paint the fireplace, applying several even coats, and after the paint dries, your fireplace is ready for use. Thanks again for watching the video. I hope it was helpful for you, and if you enjoyed it, please take the time to share it with your friends and also subscribe to my channel.